Welcome to the podcast of MotorWeek, television's original automotive magazine. MotorWeek is made possible by Lucas Oil, TireRack.com, and RockAuto.com. Here's your MotorWeek podcast host, John Davis.
Thank you, Alec Webb, and welcome to everybody to MotorWeek podcast number 275. I am John Davis, and we're coming to you from Studio C at MotorWeek World Headquarters. For the first time in over 2 years, our podcasts are back at our home, and we're delighted to have you with us. And on this particular podcast, we are graced with the presence of Brian Robinson, Greg Carlos, and Jessica Ray. And we're going to start off the show with 3 EVs. But stay tuned for later in this podcast because we're going to talk about something that if you're a car collector and you envy all the other vehicles around the world that we can't get here, you're going to be interested in our discussion of what's known as the 25-year rule about importing vehicles from other countries. But starting off, 3 EVs, and we're going to begin with what is easily the big daddy of them all. Our two-wheeling reporter, Brian Robinson, has been four-wheeling in the 2022 GMC HUMMER EV. Brian, what is it that more than big?
Well, it's interesting. I feel like we've given all the info, so I don't know how much to give, but 329 miles is the range. That's their final number. It's essentially a platform of batteries with a front and rear axle grafted onto that. So the overhangs are super short. Looks similar to the old Hummer, a modernized version of that. Driving it, it's unlike any vehicle I've ever driven. I haven't driven the Rivian or the Lightning, so I can't really compare it to them. But it's so fast. It's so smooth, just the ride and the powertrain, and then it's just insane off-road. We spent almost all of our time driving off-road. We were just outside of Phoenix. We just did like an hour on the highway to get to a public trail. It wasn't stuff that they had crafted to highlight the vehicle. We were just on a public trail. Wow. There were other trucks and motorcycles and ATVs out there.
And it's so wide. It didn't have any problem.
Yeah, well, it is definitely wide. We did a little tree trimming on some of the trails, but the thing is so maneuverable because it's got the rear wheel steer, right. And so you could take like turns you would struggle with in a Wrangler. That thing would just whip right through. It was a blast, and we had plenty of range to, like I say, drive an hour of highway off road all day, and then drive an hour back. So it's impressive. I would say that other than the maneuverability on the trail, the big takeaway I think was how little of attention attracted. I was really surprised. Driving it around Phoenix, I was expecting everyone just to go crazy. People didn't really pay any attention to it at all. I mean, there's lifted trucks out there everywhere, so I don't know. That's it. There's white vehicle. All the vehicles were white, which they all are in Phoenix. So I don't know if people just weren't noticing it, but it didn't really attract a whole lot of attention like I was expecting.
Do you think it's because it just looked like a Hummer?
Yeah, I'm not sure, to be honest with you.
I mean, I'd turn and look at any Hummer there.
I was gonna say, it's like very imposing. Like it's. I am looking forward to when we have it here, so I can like just stand next to it and see how large it is in person.
I'd be curious if you did like a social experiment with like a traditional Hummer, an old Hummer, and then like drive by the same group of people with the new Hummer and see which one gets more attention. Because like, I've seen it. It's very obvious what it is. Like that's an interesting point you made there. I just can't believe people aren't at least taking a double take of this thing.
But I drove it for maybe 15 minutes on some 35-mile-an-hour roads up in near Detroit last October, and I didn't get a single look either. And I don't know why, and I just sort of said, well, you're in Detroit. There's a lot of Hummers probably on the roads up here. But isn't that interesting? Something that we've all been sort of like, wow, that's big.
But we got to check out all the cool features. The WTF, watts to freedom, and the crab walk, all that stuff. It all works amazing. The watts to freedom, it's insane, the power that it puts down.
Explain what that is.
It's just max acceleration. I don't know how long it goes for. They had a very short range that they would let us do it. You can get to 60 in 3 seconds, and then we had to jam on the brakes. So
was it 8,000 pounds? 9,000 pounds?
Yeah, 8,000 pounds.
Seconds?
Yeah. And then the brakes will stop it just as quickly. So it's, GM's clearly done their homework on it. They turn it around quick. Everything about it is very impressive. But I'm sure it's like other EVs where once you get past that 60, I imagine that acceleration kind of tapers off, but I don't know.
What circumstances this is a two-part question, by the way, Mr. Robinson. What circumstances does the crab walk feature work in? And did they say like what it would be useful for other than off-roading? Is it like just an off-roading thing, or do they even try to say like
parking?
Yeah, parking in a city setting.
Yeah, I'm not going to say it's a gimmick because it is useful, but you have to look for ways to be useful. I'm sure something will come up where it will be useful, but yeah, basically you can just not quite parallel because the rears only turn, I think, up to 10 degrees. But yeah, you can pretty much get around things. Some people used it out on the trail. They found a reason to. They had a little exercise set up in a parking lot for us when we first got there where we got to try it out. It works really well, and it's easy to engage. It's not something you got a menu search for. There's a button right there. But it only works up to, I think, 20 miles an hour. So
I feel like that's kind of fast. That's kind of fast.
But
think of a 20-mile-an-hour crab if we're running across the beach.
It's definitely a different experience when you get it maxed out. You're cranking the wheel left, but you don't get the sensation of turning left, just the entire vehicle sliding left.
We should try to set up a specific slalom test when we get one in for testing.
Put the cones about 100 feet apart.
Yeah,
or something.
Let's do something different with that.
50 feet or something like that. Gosh, that Ultium platform that they're using, they've been real coy about what the potential is that. I mean, we've heard numbers thrown around like 500, 600. Did they give you any idea about what they're going to grow that range to?
Not really. They just talked about the modularness of it. Like the SUV version of the Hummer just has one row of batteries taken out. Now you have a shorter wheelbase, same exact vehicle. I think the Cadillac's probably the same way. No, they talked a lot about it can operate either parallel for max power and max charging quickness, or in series, which would extend the range and take longer to charge. It can instantly switch back and forth between the two. They talked a lot about that. I'm not sure if they could stack any more to add more range in there.
Just make it taller.
Yeah, all the edition ones are already sold out, but you can order. They got 3 other versions coming, starting as low as $80,000.
One more question about crab walk. How difficult is it to switch on and off? Is it just a switch?
No, yep. There's like an off-road mode selector knob, and then there's a button on top of it for crab walk.
That's easy.
Yeah.
So now let's go from something that starting price was
$110 for the edition ones.
And they're going to have an $80,000 base model at some point. Yep. Let's go from that to something that's more within the realm of most people that can afford vehicles, and that is Toyota's first real modern EV, the Toyota bZ4X. Before you even start and tell us what that actually is, why that name?
I'm glad you asked that question. That's what I was going to lead off with.
I thought it was the brand name of your water bottle.
Yeah. Full disclosure, they gave me a water bottle, which I am currently drinking from right now. Hold on. That's good bZ4X water. So what does bZ4X stand for? BZ stands for Beyond Zero, and that's kind of like the real marketing term of like how they approach electrification. I can't even really describe it. They had all this marketing jargon. Essentially, if you see BZ on a Toyota, that means it's electric. It's their sub-brand. You get to 4, which correlates to the size of the vehicle. Doesn't mean 4-passenger, doesn't mean 4-seater. They just said this is the size of the vehicle. So this bZ4X is what they consider number 4. They can go up, would be a bigger one, down would be a smaller one.
And you would call this a compact?
This is a compact because it's actually very close to the size of a RAV4 and actually a little bigger. It's longer, wider, and a little shorter. And then to the X, that denotes SUV. So if you see in the future, you can't just call this like the Toyota bZ, because there's actually going to be more of them with different letters and numbers. So bZ4X means an electric compact crossover, essentially. And like you said, John, a little bit cheaper than the Hummer. It starts at $42,000.
That's before any incentives.
That's before incentives, before destination, and all that. But I do think it's good that they made their longest range model, which will be 252 miles of EV driving range, is their base model. It's the front wheel drive version, XLE trim. They only have 2 trims, XLE and Limited. So if you want the most range, you get the cheapest bZ4X. Like I said, it's around $42,000. All-wheel drive, you can add to either XLE or Limited trim. It's only $2,000, which Toyota seems to package all-wheel drive and like hybrids, if you're talking about electrification, very nicely, because $2,000 is actually not that big of a deal when you look at ID4. I think it's closer to $4,000, the Volkswagen electric to add all-wheel drive.
That $2,000 not only adds all-wheel drive, but obviously adds a second motor.
Adds a second motor. So, like I said, in contrast to the ID4, which is its competition, and we'll say maybe Kia EV6, Hyundai Ioniq 5. This is front-wheel drive. Those other ones are rear-wheel drives. This one's front-wheel drive. If you want all-wheel drive, they'll add the second motor in the back. You get a little more horsepower. 0 to 60 with that comes at around 6.5 seconds, as opposed to like 7 seconds for the front-wheel drive version. So you do get a little bit more performance with all-wheel drive, in addition to having more traction. And it's a slightly bigger battery, and I'm talking like 1.4 kilowatt hours bigger than the front-wheel drive. So
it's kind of weird.
Yeah, it's a little bit interesting that they offer 2 different batteries between front-wheel drive. Well, they're not different. It's just slightly bigger for the all-wheel drive.
Usually there's more of a differentiation, but anyway.
Yeah, but basically, so the entry-level one is 71.4 kilowatt hours. But to the styling, though, I've heard quite a few comments, and they're generally negative from the general public. Shocker.
I don't know the comments
I
that we got.
I don't agree with them. I think it looks very nice. I think you could argue that maybe the black cladding around the wheel wells could off-put some people. But I think it looks very modern. I think it looks closer to what Lexus is offering than Toyota.
I would agree with that. I think that's a great observation.
More, like I said, it's lower than a RAV4, so it's like a low slung, more of like a raised hatchback than an SUV. But inside, you get the benefits of extra leg room. I sat in the back. The headroom's okay. The leg room, I think, is what really impresses.
Yeah, but
so
you're 6'3",
so
okay.
it's I think the side, without having jumped into a RAV4 and then the bZ4X, I can't say definitively, but it felt to me very similar, and I don't think you're going to be worried about space in this vehicle. But like I said, so it is an EV. The front end just drops down. There's no grill or anything. There's no need for a grill. So I think it's a very nice looking. If you want to compare it to something, it's probably closer to like I would say an Lexus NX than a RAV4 in terms of.
I would like to compare it with something, Greg.
Go ahead. Compare it to whatever you'd like.
So this is another vehicle that Toyota partnered with Subaru with.
Correct.
So there's a Subaru version called the Solterra. How differently do they look? Do you know?
I haven't done a lot of looking at the Solterra. I've briefly glanced at it, and there's an obvious relationship there.
And the interior is almost exactly the same.
I've seen more of the Subaru version, and it looks like a Toyota. So yeah.
I will note that the when you do go to all-wheel drive, they actually have now Subaru's branded X mode. Like that is in the Toyota now, so it's.
Oh, that's interesting.
Yeah, there's varying modes within like all-wheel drive that can give you more traction, less traction, however you need it. In terms of driving, I thought it was probably one of the more quiet EVs because you get a little bit of a mixed bag with EVs. Some of them aren't silent. A lot of people assume they are, and that's not always the case. This one, even in the 2-motor setup, they did a really nice job taking out the electric motor noise, which is usually like an electric whir. I didn't hear it at speeds below like 40 miles per hour. And then when like you really get on it, you hear it. But even then, it's not bad. Road and wind noise was great. Interesting thing was the regenerative braking. A lot of EVs like to use the one-pedal driving mode, at least give you the option for it. And Toyota said, nope, we're not doing that at all. You have a regenerative boost mode, which will increase regenerative braking when you let off the gas, or I'm sorry, the accelerator. The motors will start spinning backwards, charging the battery, and you'll feel it slowing you down, but it will not bring you down to a stop, because Toyota's like, we don't want that, and we don't think our customers want that. And I thought that was odd, because why wouldn't you just give me the option to have it? I'm somebody who does like one-pedal driving, but the good news is if you don't want any of that, you can just turn that regenerative boost mode off, and you let off the accelerator, and you just coast. So there's definitely an advantage to that, which like for power purposes, one of the engineers was like, I kind of hate regenerative braking, because like you're kind of fighting yourself in terms of acceleration.
It throws you forward if it's not done well.
Yeah, but for Toyota's first real national EV, they did have the RAV4 like in '97 and 2011. They were
It was
very
kind of
limited.
it was kind of an experiment.
Yeah, it wasn't all their system. I think that had like Tesla stuff in it, did it? Yeah.
Yeah.
did.
So I think it's a very good effort. I think it's exactly what Toyota wanted. I think it's exactly what you'd expect from a Toyota EV. There's a little bit of maybe some, I don't know, some to be desired for the all-wheel drive limited's range, which is down to like 222. It's not the longest range EV, but it's very competitive, I think, and it's priced well. And the warranty I'll finish with was 8 years, 100,000 miles on the battery, which again they say is very competitive.
You.
Me? Oh, no, sorry.
Jen.
Well, I was actually going to say Greg was really on a roll.
She's
there.
unusually quiet today.
I was instructed to stop and let people talk, and I just blew right through it. I'm sorry.
Well, no, I think like in the beginning you'd mentioned that the difference between all-wheel drive and not all-wheel drive was like $2,000 or something like that.
Yeah.
Well, I drove the EV6, and it's a difference of like $10,000 to upgrade to a dual motor all-wheel drive setup.
Yeah.
So. It sounds like Toyota knows what they're talking about.
And it's available next month. That's my last comment. Next month it'll be hitting dealerships.
You're sitting there, and you're this brand that's known for hybrids and fuel economy, and you look like you've been late to the party, and here they show up with a highly competitive, very well-priced EV that's going to be available to a lot more people certainly than a Hummer, and they're coming in at a time when the market's just sort of exploding because of all the high gas prices. So it's, whatever way I'm sure it all wasn't planned this way, but it's like the right vehicle at the right time.
Yeah.
Yeah, the public generally in America trusts Toyota. I think
That's something else.
might be one that
the quality aspect of the brand is so strong. It's probably going to make that thing a sellout.
I just feel like you're going to walk into a dealership and not a single person's going to know how to say the name of the car. There's like, I just want that electric Toyota.
It doesn't roll
This is the bZ4X.
My explanation, I don't want people to construe as that I'm for the name. I think it actually does not roll off the tongue very well.
bZ4X.
Yeah.
And it's like the uppercase and lowercase. Yeah, it's a little funky.
It's horrible I've been writing the script, and I'm trying to be, accurate with because it goes to closed captioning.
Right, yes.
So I'm trying to type out lowercase b, uppercase Z, 4, uppercase
luck.
X.
Just going to have to do copy paste the whole time.
Yeah.
Think about Quattro. Every time you see an Audi with Quattro, it's supposed to be all caps and never is. Well, Jessica, since you mentioned the EV6, why don't you talk about that? That was in recently, and I have to say another very impressive and reasonably priced EV.
We haven't tested.
I have. I've driven.
Oh, you've driven it, yes.
Wow. You've driven all the EVs. Why are we even on this thing?
Disclosure, as part of the North American Car of the Year Award competition last year, they brought everything out. So we all got very brief driving time in it. But we've driven the Ioniq 5.
Yes.
Which is very, very similar.
It's its cousin, I guess, if you want to classify its relationship as that. They're built on the same platform. They look very, very different, though. They're definitely different enough that I think there are probably things that people like about the EV6 more, and there's going to be things that people like about the Ioniq 5 more. The Ioniq 5, obviously, we've talked about it before. It's very modular, very square.
It's very old SUV-ish looking.
Yes, and it's
if you like old
8-bit.
Jeep Cherokees
8-bit.
and stuff.
Yeah.
Brian, you.
I don't know, that whole front end with the pixelated lights and all. I guess is that what you're referring to with that? Yeah.
When it lights up, it's really cool.
Yeah.
For sure.
I mean, it's cool. So, but the EV6 is like, it's hard to really pin down exactly what it is. I guess you would kind of classify it as like a half, like, kind of like sports car looking like hatchback thing. I don't.
They
It's
call it an SUV.
they
That's-
call
yeah.
it an
that's
SUV. They
marketing,
do.
yeah.
They call it an SUV.
Just call it a crossover.
It covers everything.
Everything. Yeah.
At one point, we actually did call I think a Chevy Avalanche a crossover. So
Right.
Yeah,
really,
Yeah.
thin.
we did.
Because it was a crossover between an old school SUV and a pickup truck, and that's
So we can call the EV6 a crossover, but so they did market it to us as an SUV, and it does have a lot of utility. But I drove it in California on some of those twisty mountain roads, and it drove way more like a sports car than any crossover that I've ever driven.
This is specifically the GT or all of them?
I drove the GT line.
Okay.
It's not the GT. A GT version is coming.
All right.
The GT.
More confusion.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh, Kia!
Every
Why? Why?
But was it more than just the weight, though? We all know that almost every EV we've had, if not every EV, has handled pretty well because you've got such a low center of gravity.
Right.
But did you feel that you were driving something more than just a weight?
Yeah. Oh, because I felt like it had a really good balance because it didn't feel like it was very heavy. I mean, you felt very, very steady on a lot of like the curves and the turns and such, but I definitely didn't feel like it was heavy and that I was being like dragged to the ground, which sometimes. I mean, I remember the first time I got in an ID4, that's how I felt. I was like, I really can feel like the battery in this car, and that's not necessarily a bad thing, but I really enjoyed it in the EV6. And you have so many options too with this with the EV6. You have a base light model, you got the wind model, a GT line, and then eventually there's going to be a GT, which is going to be I think 576 horsepower, which I drove the GT line all-wheel drive, so it's got the dual motor setup. It was 320 horsepower, and I didn't even really want to keep it in sport mode because it was so crazy.
Hyper?
Yeah, it was. Really? It was like, I remember like even the Kia people had to be like, relax, like on some of these roads because it was. They didn't want people to get ahead of themselves because you really could. I mean, there was a lot of oomph.
That comment probably wasn't for you. It was for all the other journalists that like throw cars around those roads.
No, I've been on a Porsche event. But
give us, since you have driven both the Ioniq 5 and the EV6, kind of compare the two. Like if a buyer is walking in and says, I'm not sure which one, they look different. Mechanically, they're pretty much the same. How would you compare the two of them?
I say if you're a taller person, you're probably going to like the Ioniq 5, specifically the interior-wise. I don't know, Greg, if you were inside the Ioniq 5.
I drove it, yeah.
So a lot of room in that front, right? Like the entire console area is just completely open. Whereas with the Kia, I think the Kia maybe feels a little bit more upscale for sure. But you have like a bar to your right. So whereas a lot of times, you have all this space now that you don't have a traditional shifter. Kia sort of added this like, I guess, bar.
Almost like a sports car console.
Yes. So I think like if you're a larger person, you probably would want, or a taller person, you would probably want the Ioniq 5 over that. But I felt like the EV6 just had a bit more of an upscaleness to it that the Ioniq 5 didn't.
That's kind of fitting in with Kia's marketing. They want to be a little sportier, probably, and a little more upscale than Hyundai.
Yeah.
So,
like I said, you have a lot of options. I will say everybody cares about mileage. So the base light rear-wheel drive light model has 167 horsepower, but gets 232 miles of range, and that starts about $42,000 before tax incentives. And then you have the Wind and GT lines. They have a bigger battery, and they come in either a rear drive or an all-wheel drive model. And essentially, the all-wheel drive model can get a max range of 274 miles for the all-wheel drive version, and for the rear drive version, you can get 310 miles of range, which is
7 more than the Ioniq.
Yes. Yeah.
And about what I guess the top for the Mach-E is. Mach-E's a little over 300.
It's like, yeah.
I don't know. I don't remember.
Yeah, I think
it's a little
30 something.
I've forgotten, but it's a
Yeah.
little. But before we leave the whole EV thing today, it's interesting that how long ago did the Bolt come out? Was that 3 years?
The Bolt
more than
EV,
that,
yeah. Well, it's on the second generation.
And I think the first time I drove it was at the LA Auto Show, maybe 5 years ago.
Yeah.
Has it been that long?
I was thinking
It's been
17.
longer.
All right, so that
16
was-
or 17 is when it came out.
So that broke the 200-mile barrier.
Right.
Now we're just eking into the 300-mile barrier, although I think the Hummer 329 is pretty impressive. We've asked this question many times. The answer keeps changing. This is enough mileage, enough range for people to use as a second car. Where do we have to get to for the people to say, I can get by with this as my only car, I can do anything I want with it? Given the fact that, I know there's not enough fast chargers out there and everything like that.
Well, I was going to say, I don't think it's range. I think it's infrastructure. I think it's fast charging. Because what everybody should know, one of the reasons why really the Ioniq 5 and the EV6 are impressive EVs compared to other ones is because they have the 800-volt charging architecture, which is really important for the future of charging.
Because that should enable you to get a charge in about 80% charge in about less than 20 minutes.
Yeah.
Yes, and you can get up to 350 kilowatt charging, which means that you can use the fastest chargers at the fastest capacity. If you hook up a Mach-E to 350 charger, it'll get you 150 but that's all it can charge. So I really think it's an infrastructure issue, because 300 miles that's what I get in my Jeep. But if I could go to a charge in less than 20 minutes, that you don't need to have a charger at your house to be able to do that.
Yeah, I think that Americans are not quite as savvy as you are. I was just thinking my SUV.
What about me?
And what are you anyway if you're not American? So, I'm curious.
The average vehicle we get in here with a full tank of gas will go 400 plus or minus miles.
You're talking about? No, there's not too many that are up over.
Really?
Yeah, everything's in the 3 to 350. There's a few that are up 400.
So you think we're there then?
Well, again, like Jessica was saying, it's really all about the charging, getting back on the road quickly, more so than adding more miles on.
I feel like manufacturers should be advertising their infotainment solutions to this problem, where their navigation is tied into
It tells you where the charging
how much
stations
charge
are.
your car has, where the next charger is. If you type in, you want to go here, it'll be like, all right, you can get there with this much range left, or you can stop here. Here's a charging station here. Here's a charging station there. That should alleviate a lot of the anxiety that a lot of people feel, because like Robinson was saying, I mean, we're approaching the point where these EVs are getting to where most gas cars are getting range-wise, but you can just find a gas station anywhere, and that's why people don't really care, because it's just like, oh, well, I'll just go fill up at
Every
closest gas
corner's
station.
got one or two.
Yeah.
That's actually the weakness, I think, of both the Ioniq 5 and the EV6, is that they do not have that native route planning system that Greg was talking about, that Mach-E has, that the Polestar has.
Worked very well for me.
I can't believe they wouldn't put that in there. There's got to be an app for that. I'm sure there's an app for
You
that.
can.
There
There is an app.
There's a
But
Department of Energy
savvy
app
people,
for it.
right? If you're
Be more savvy, America.
I was going to say,
Surprised that's not there.
Americans.
And it really is. I mean, obviously, this is a type of vehicle that has, over-the-air updates. So this could be something in the future. But, because it was like that with Polestar. Remember, it was so bare bones when the first model we tested came out, and now Volvo has taken it, and it's much better.
The Mach-E, when we had the first one in, I took a moderate length trip in that, and that was extremely useful.
Yeah.
Telling me where the charging stations were and and if you didn't stop at it, it's basically saying, you idiot, you're going to run out.
Yeah.
Terrific. 3 new EVs, and it's getting to the point where between our first drives and our road test, we're doing an awful lot of electric vehicles, more than I thought a couple years ago we'd be doing. Mm-hmm. Thank you all. Let's move on to our lightning round. And this is a subject that we don't normally talk about too much, which is the world of motorsports. But obviously, a lot of our viewers are very much tuned to it, and the folks over at MAV TV, that's their strong point. It was recently announced that the Las Vegas Grand Prix will join the Formula One World Championship for 2023. The night race street course will take drivers through the city and down the famous Las Vegas Strip. Along with Austin and Miami, the Las Vegas Grand Prix will be the third F1 race to be held in the U.S. in a single season, which I think is an amazing turn of events. With the location along with the Formula One's newfound popularity in the U.S., do you think that the Vegas Grand Prix will become a staple of the Formula One season? Certainly spectacular looking.
I would imagine it will be, just because it's Vegas, and I think
it's going to bring a lot of people to town.
Yeah, there's a lot of drivers who I'm sure would love to be in Vegas for a week. I did look at the track, and it looks kind of boring, honestly. But if you've ever been to Vegas,
is that because it's so flat?
Been on the streets, yeah, it's flat. I mean, there are other street courses, but it's just there's not really a whole lot of diversity in the track. There's a super long straight, and then there's like a couple turns, and that's about it. It's like I was just in Long Beach, and they were setting up for the street course, and that's a pretty interesting track. And just looking at what I've seen the Vegas track will be, I don't think it'll be a super exciting race out like the actual racing, but the event itself should be incredible.
I think that a boring course is a real detriment. I think that was actually one of the things that hurt the Baltimore Grand Prix.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I don't know about that.
Potholes, maybe also.
Well, they filled in the potholes. The problem was it made the cars go airborne when they filled them in. Well, at least they won't have that problem out there. I think if Vegas latches onto it and they find that it ups the people during an off season or an off time, it'll probably become a staple.
Well, they're probably not going to Russia next year, so I would say they need somewhere to hold a fill. So I don't know. I think it'll be like everything else in Vegas. It's smoke and mirrors, and it'll be super popular for
all sorts of things, Brian.
It'll be super popular for a couple years, and then all those people will move on to the next thing, like when they get another team or whatever, another event. I know, like when the NASCAR, they had their championship out there, and they had burnout contests and donut contests and stuff right there on the strip, and that was exciting, I think, more so than just watching F1 cars parade down the street,
Why do you think Long Beach has survived? I mean, I don't even know how long the Long Beach Grand Prix has been around, but
a while.
Yeah, it's all about sponsorship dollars and if they want to, pay for it or not.
But that race conjures up an awful lot of attention. I don't know if it's just Californians or more.
Yeah, history. They're just kind of latching on to that history.
And for F1, I'd be a lot more excited if they went back to like Watkins Glen. I think that would be.
That was good.
I would love to see that more so than another boring street race.
What is there to do in Watkins Glen?
Watch cars pass one another. I mean, I don't know.
You could actually get around, which is one of my biggest problems with F1 is when someone gets in a lead, unless they have pit or have a mechanical problem, they win.
It's got to be just the response that Americans have had to Drive to Survive, the Netflix series, because I have friends now who've never been into cars or motorsport at all, and now they're all about it because the show is just incredible. It's a great show. If you haven't seen it, you don't have to be into racing at all to,
just a good
to be
show.
into
It's
it.
a good intro into the sport, for sure.
Yeah.
That's online. It's on the internet.
Yeah, this is the first time hearing this. What are you talking about?
Oh, streaming service deprived. Okay, we teased at the top of the show that we were going to talk about something called the 25-year rule. And so the question for everyone at the table now is, What do you think about it? There's a lot of controversy around it. And what is it? Very briefly, the 25-year rule was enacted in 1988. It was called the Import Vehicle Safety Compliance Bill. And what it did was basically say unless a vehicle is 25 years old, it can't be imported to the U.S. Without meeting all of the safety requirements. If it's older than 25 years, basically you can bring it in and not worry about some things. And I should say this is a national rule. A lot of the states have rules on top of this particular rule. So a lot of car enthusiasts and collectors have been, pretty upset for the last 40, 30 years plus that if they see something overseas that's really cool, they can't bring it here. They can't even bring it here under any condition. There's plenty of cases where people have tried and they've been seized at the ports and scrapped. Is it time for something like the 25-year ban on importing vehicles to the U.S. that we can't get here? Is it time for that to go away? What do you think about it? The mics are open.
I would say there's so many vehicles now are global vehicles that it's not so much an issue. It's more of a positive thing in that so many of those cool cars that are now, you can't afford them. They're 25 years old and they're scattered about the world. Now you can bring them here. I think it's more a good thing than a negative thing.
They called this the new dealer protection law. And, people would call it because Mercedes had a lot to do back in the day with getting this passed.
I did a real quick read of it because I wasn't super well versed in it. But it was like the whole gray market area where like when inflation was really high over here, they were buying cheap in Europe, bringing them over, and then reselling here for quite a profit.
In the 70s and early 80s, there was a booming business in the U.S. with companies that would basically federalize anything that you brought over. And there were people that went to new car dealers in Germany and bought the same model that is sold here, but could get them at so much less. They could ship it over, make the modifications, which usually were very minor, and sell it, and everybody made a profit. And of course, that left the manufacturers over here out in the cold, and they got to the point where they said, don't even think about trying to get parts for it or bring it into our dealerships. We won't touch it. And there were a lot of unscrupulous people at the time, too. We actually did.
In the 80s?
No. Car dealers?
There were companies all over the country that were federalizing imported vehicles that were coming in before this law took effect. And it takes a lot of effort. In those days, it took a lot of effort to take a European vehicle and make it meet our smog standards because we were way ahead of the Europeans at that time. And they were cranking these things out like chitlets. And, the government was going in and finding out it was all fraud and seizing it, seizing their operations. And that led more fuel to passing something like this. But today, as Brian mentioned, with almost every vehicle in the world either meeting our emission standards or having superior standards, even though some of the parts may be different, it seems that the time has come for this to go away. But I have a feeling it won't.
Probably not. Probably won't go away because, like you were saying, the standards are closer than they've ever been now. But there are still some things that are just harder over here than they are in Europe and vice versa. But
the amount of airbags, some of the safety systems involved, lights. But lighting, we're finally coming up in this country to lighting that they've had in Europe for quite a while. But there is also apparently this United Nations, I don't know what you call it, department rule or something that has been trying to get car makers all over the world to meet the same standards so you could ship vehicles from one to the other. And they said it's notable that the only two major countries not in agreement with this or in compliance with it are the U.S. and Canada. And Canada has a 15-year rule, and there is a push here to get ours cut down to 15, but I don't know if it's going to happen or not. It's an interesting thing. If you've never heard of it, look up the gray market cars. They were cars in the late 70s, early 80s that you could import and have federalized. And look up this 25-year rule. It's kind of interesting stuff. I tried to buy a gray market car. I went to.
Really?
Oh,
Yeah, it had been.
Maybe another podcast.
It had been federalized. It was a Mercedes. I went to Florida to see it. But what happened is I found out that Maryland would probably not let me title it.
Sounds about right.
Yeah. So some state rules supersede some of the national rules. Okay. Anyone have a rant and rave, something that is you're really happy about or pretty negative about that's come across your way in the last couple of weeks?
I have something to tag along. Maybe it's. Oh, sorry. Wait. Oh, sorry. Oh, no. Yeah, you're right. Sorry, I forgot we're in the studio.
Yeah, we're in the studio. We have
Sorry.
these weird like devices.
You can't be too far from the microphone. So.
There's a microphone here. I think my rant is that I know exactly what car I would import tomorrow if I could, and it's a Suzuki Jimny.
Ah, really? Right.
Which, if our viewers, if you don't know what it is, it literally looks like you took a Wrangler and a G-Class, a G-Wagon, and they had a baby. And that's exactly what it is.
It's been around for a while. There aren't any old enough to get in.
Well, I like the new ones.
And
they're really cheap too. They're they're like $25,000, maybe like US dollars.
They have
overseas.
a bunch of really cheap off-roaders over in Asia that would be awesome. They're like all those mini pickups,
and they're
SUVs.
proper.
Cool.
They're proper 4x4s.
My dad just forwarded me an article. So that ship that caught on fire with all the Volkswagens and stuff. There was obviously Bentleys and Lamborghinis and all kinds of stuff. But there was a report that there was a JDM Prelude SIR that was being imported over here that was lost, and I just feel terrible
R.I.P.
for that person whoever was getting it or wherever it was going. It does not exist anymore.
Star-crossed. Wow.
That's my rant.
Anybody else? Well, before we wrap up this podcast, I do want to remind everyone about something that's coming up on the weekend of April 23rd on our MotorWeek episode 4133. If you listen to our podcast or you've seen a recent episode of MotorWeek, you know that in mid-March we lost our longtime friend and master technician, Pat Goss, very suddenly. We have been using up the remainder of the new segments that Pat had produced for Goss's Garage. And on the 23rd weekend, we will have a tribute within that show to Pat and his very long career, not only with us, but in the whole car care arena. And so those of you, and we've heard from so many tens of thousands that were huge fans of Pat Goss and learned almost everything that you know about automobiles and car care from him. Be sure to catch that particular episode, and I'm sure we'll have it up on our YouTube channel pretty quickly after that.
Yep, we sure will.
And speaking of that, if you are looking for more MotorWeek and you're thinking, well, where do I see MotorWeek? If you're out there and you haven't done so, shame on you, but go to our MotorWeek.org website. In the upper right hand corner at the top, there's a tab about the show. Pull it down, put in your zip code, and you'll get the information on the local public television station in your area, time and day that you can watch us. You can also go over to our cable channel partner, MAV TV, at mavtv.com. They show us somewhere around 12 times a week at various times.
12 times.
I think it's maybe even more than that. They're a terrific partner. We love those folks. So in between a lot of their motorsports, it's great to be there and be represented with new car information and common sense how to just live with your car day in, day out at MAV TV. We're also available for streaming at a variety of places, particularly at PBS Living. And you can even go on to the pbs.org website and do /MotorWeek and see the most recent episodes, and it's free.
It's free and on the PBS video app, which if we are, we don't air on your local station, that's the place to go because everything will be available for free. And it's on most smart TVs.
Correct.
So you can watch it on TV.
So if you've got a screen, whether it's a TV, a phone, or a tablet, you can be a part of MotorWeek. And that's what makes this show so terrific after 41 years. Thanks, everybody. We'll see you soon on another MotorWeek podcast. I want to say special thanks to our audio engineer today, Jillian Cookman, our podcast producer, of course, Jessica Ray right here, and our podcast creator, Bob Mixter. Till next time, thanks for being a part of MotorWeek.
You've been listening to the podcast of MotorWeek, television's original automotive magazine. MotorWeek is made possible by Lucas Oil, TireRack.com, and RockAuto.com. For additional information on podcasts, videos, and showtimes, visit our website at motorweek.org. And watch MotorWeek, television's longest-running automotive magazine series each week on your local PBS station.